What is the protagonist? My next guest and I were just talking about that. The dictionary definition says it's the main character, but I don't think it fully encompasses what a protagonist is. To me, a protagonist is the hero of the story. And in my concept, you are the protagonist. You are the hero of your story. And today we're going to talk to a great guest, my good friend Marcus Torgerson, about becoming the protagonist, becoming the hero of your story, and how Marcus became the hero of his story. And he's still working on becoming the protagonist. Marcus, welcome to the show. Welcome to the new show, brother.
Well, I love being on anything that you got going on, but I'm going to be completely transparent. The idea of this show obviously has a big smile on my heart because I love the word. It's a new word for my language, protagonist. I think we actually even mentioned that in a previous chat that we'd had. It's such a good word, but it's definitely one that a lot of people don't actually understand what it means, and maybe it means something different for everybody else. But I think you and I are dialed in, squared up with what that word's supposed to mean.
I think one of the goals of this show is to change the narrative of what a protagonist is. It's not just in thriller books. It's not just in movies.
No.
We all could be the protagonist. Believe me, my shift over the past almost 5 decades now has changed a lot since I was a child.
Yep.
To my different phases of being a protagonist. And
Yeah.
so is yours.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that when you hear protagonist, you think of some kind of specially trained, badass human being. And quite honestly, any human being who's survived 20 years or 15 years of their life so far, believe me, you're a protagonist if you've made it this far, So.
I look at my son, 14 years old, my daughter. If you've survived, I mean, they had to survive through the pandemic. They had to survive a lot. They're building themselves into being a protagonist, and you don't have to be specially trained. You don't have to have a military background. You don't have to be in law enforcement. You don't have to be a firefighter. You don't never have had to wear a uniform or a badge to be a protagonist.
No. If you've survived the internet, like, think of it this way, your teen kids have had to do stuff that you and I had no concept of. Our bullying was usually something in, like, within earshot or physically. Your kids are getting bombarded by hundreds of thousands of millions of people at their keyboards who are bots or just mean individuals who are 3,000, 10,000 miles away and have the freedom to say whatever they want without getting punched in the face. I wouldn't want to be a teenager right now. They're stronger than I don't think I'd make it, to be quite honest.
And there's so much they keep internalized too. That's why mental health is such a big concept.
Yep.
As older parents, even, if I didn't have kids till I was older, same thing with you. Mm-hmm. It's just, you don't really understand what they're going through because, like you said, it was right in front of our face when we were kids.
Yep. And I think the one lesson that we need to learn as parents is to be open. We have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. We need to learn to shut up and listen, even if we don't like to hear what is going to be said, but the freedom of them having carte blanche with what they say. Better they say it to us than internalize it, and then before you know it, you find them hanging in your closet. The guilt and shame and regret and all that can be rectified by just simply shutting up and saying, okay, you're going to say things that are going to piss me off, and that's okay. But
it's fine.
It out. Let it
it's
out.
It's fine.
Yep.
Do it.
Yep.
Let them be open and let them be honest.
Yeah.
Jeez, can you imagine my parents letting me be honest when I was a kid?
Well, and we'd have a different relationship with our parents. Would we have been able to be honest if they'd been able to handle the honesty? But the generations past, if you want to change a generational curse or a narrative of a parenting, it starts with a simple thing. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? Talk to me. This person in school, you wouldn't understand. You're right. I probably won't understand. Make me understand. Help me understand what's going on.
Well, that's the thing is, like you said, being open and letting them come to you. This is part of your maturity. This is part of you as an adult, as a parent, becoming the protagonist. And you know what else you are in your child's eye? You're the hero until you're not.
Yep.
And being open and honest with them is more than likely going to make you the absolute protagonist to them.
Yep. And it won't be right away. There's no immediate gratification. You're talking 10, 15, 20, 30 years down. You're dead and buried, and they're talking good things about you, about how my father, my mother, my whoever the parent is, was such a hero to me because they were open, they understood, they were strong for me. They showed me what strength was, showed me what love was, yada, yada, yada. It's our actions and our listening that will make us a protagonist in their life, which makes us better as a human being and be able to stand up and be stronger for ourselves, which is being a protagonist.
Now, anybody that follows you on social media understands that you have very deep thoughts. You're very open. You're very caring. And you talk a lot with your heart.
Mhm.
When you bring up that with your children, that with, being a father and me talking about that with my children, that feeling in my heart when I think about my kids makes me more happier and more feeling like I am a hero because I have such great kids
Yep.
that it's unbelievable. I hope this concept for people who aren't parents out there, you can understand it, but it's just something that, Marcus and I hold children very near and dear to our hearts.
And I want to make sure we're clear about this. The reason I can say these things to you is because I wasn't a good father. I wasn't a good role model or protagonist. I was not. My actions, my verbs, my everything was the opposite. So when I'm telling you as a new parent, if you're listening, listen, be open, do all the things that you think. Like, it's not, I'm not pulling it out of my butt. I'm telling you, learn from my mistakes. I am the villain in a lot of stories. And I'm the villain because of not knowing what I knew at this point. So to be the hero, to be the protagonist in your story, first of all, you've got to be okay with the mistakes you've made in the past. And knowing that you are the villain, or the, what is the villain in the movie?
Antagonist.
If you've been the antagonist, so learn from it so that you can just make amends in your actions, not living in the past, but being like, okay, here we go. All right, I got a new child, or this is why we as grandparents are supposed to be like, we end up being rock stars, because our relationships with our kid usually suck, and we're trying to sit there and be like, okay, I was a jerk when I was your father, but as your grandfather, I'm gonna be a rock star because I've got 30 years of experience of what I did wrong.
You brought up some excellent points, because lessons learned. I have not been the best father throughout the whole thing. There's been times where I've been angry, depressed. I've gone through my own mental health issues, all while I was a father. And some of the toughest times I've gone through are when my kids were very young. And it took me a while to actually like step back, take a deep breath, and start really getting my mental health and my physical health to the next phase. And that comes into like, a lot of times I follow you and I see you going out and you're training civilians. You're training civilians and other people that want to become protagonists, people who want to not sit in fear in their homes. And one quote on your website, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Walk with peace in your heart, love in your soul, and violence in your head. You can be caring and still be able to defend yourself and also defend others. You can, but no one to turn to violence. Absolute violence too.
And the ironic twist of everything is, so I made that little doohickey thing, let's just say it was 15 years ago. And at the time, it meant what it meant at that time. But who I am now, being violent in the mind is also about being violent towards the negative insurgency that comes in you and around you, and being able to stand up for yourself and say, I am not going to allow that vocabulary that's coming towards me have any power whatsoever. And a lot of times when you're being violent in your brain about negative insurgency, it usually is people who are closest to you. And it's those people that you have to be like, listen, I love you, but you are so toxic in your tone and the way you speak to me because I've allowed it to happen, I'm not going to let that happen. Yeah, they're going to get butthurt or whatever. But the fact that you can stand up and say to somebody who's been very, very rude to you, sir, ma'am, dad, mom, whatever, I don't like how you're talking to me. So I'm going to walk away because I don't want to hear it. That is, for me, the epitome of being a protagonist, because of the fact that anybody can be violent. Anybody. You give me 10 minutes and I can make anybody violent. But for someone to have the self-worth and the mental health to say, you know what, I'm not cool with the way you're speaking to me, so I'm just going to step away. You don't have to get all, big words and really, this is how I feel. It doesn't matter. I don't like it. I'm walking away. Would you eat if I gave you something that was laced with just the most horrific smelling, tasting thing in the world? If I gave that to you on a plate, said you got to eat it, you take a bite, spit it out, and be like, I'm not eating that. So then why are we going to allow people to sit there and talk to us the way that we do? Because it's our loved ones, husband, wife, aunt, uncle, dog, cat, whatever.
When you mention insurgency and then negative insurgency, I never looked at it like a mental attacks, because an insurgent is coming after you. They're not it could be one person, it could be 5 people, it could be a whole army of insurgents. But when you think about that negative insurgency and then having to, sometimes the best thing is to take a step back and see how you're going to handle it. And a lot of times when it comes to anger and anger management, when someone is picking at you, especially someone close to you, picking at you, and you feel it deep inside, because there's someone that you are very passionate about. That could be a loved one, it could be anybody that you're closely associated with. It's someone who knows you. So they know how to push your buttons. The protagonist, and that's the other thing about a protagonist. I have never read one book, seen one movie, or talked to any real protagonists who have not had some sort of outside negative insurgency affecting their psyche.
Yep. And take the 80s out of it. Okay, we're going to take the 80s out of it, even though they were some of the best movies ever made, ever. Though for the most part, when you're being ambushed, you need to get off the X and reassess and then return fire or return the violence that you're getting. Well, in this case, to be truly strong, maybe reacting with verbal stuff is not tactically the best thing to do. Get off the X, get out of the line of fire of their verbiage. Be clear. Listen, we're going to engage in this later, or never. Either way, I'm stepping out. Because to sit there and fight toe to toe with somebody who's generally happy with the bickering and the fighting because they know that they're winning or whatever the word is, we'll get off the X and say, see you later. Have a nice day. Kill them with kindness.
When it comes to someone who's been close to you, loved ones or whatever, I read something the other day, and it was about having best friends. I've had best friends since I was a kid.
Yeah.
They've transitioned a lot.
Oh, yeah.
A lot over the years. And you kind of see who's authentic, and your circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And just because someone was a best friend during one phase of your life doesn't mean they always have the best outlook for you later on in your life. So it's not just loved ones. And it does mean take a step back, re-engage, reassess, and move on.
Yeah. You got to remember, if I knew Jason from 25 years ago and then still treated you as Jason of 25 years ago, I mean, people will do that. If I haven't seen somebody in a whole bunch of years, they're normally going to react to me in a way that they last have a memory of me, which is fine. However, after 5 or 10 minutes of our conversation, if you're still choosing to hold on to that past way, like that's our only connection, I'm going to try to bring you forward. And this is me now. Many times people don't want to do it because it shines light on the fact that their growth has been stalled, or maybe they've regressed, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But they're not at even in your, not level, but they're not even in your swimming pool. Like they're in a whole different body of water. And that causes friction. Oh man, what's like the fact that I'm sober, right? If people met me now and they haven't seen me, and the last time they did see me, I was not very nice because I was not a good drunk. And they're like, man, I liked it better when you were drunk and punching out people. Hey man, cool. You like that version of me, and I don't like that version of me, so that's cool. I like when they're honest about the fact that they don't like who I am. It makes my life a lot easier,
A lot easier.
right? The problem is, and I think there's going to be a lot of people who will resonate with family members. And I'm fortunate because, with the exception of my son, like he's the last of my bloodline. Everybody's dead, so I can talk all the schmack I want because there ain't nobody around. The hardest part is when you have family members who smile to your face. Oh, isn't that great? And they are slitting throats, stabbing kidneys, gutting you from stem to stern, verbally from behind. And that's a challenge. That's where I have issues with. I don't care if you dislike me. Be honest about how you dislike me. This makes it easier for me than when you smile in my face and go, oh my goodness, Marcus, you are the best guy ever. He's such a prick. You know, like
Marcus, the one thing I hate is two-faced people, and we've all seen it. It's not just family. Believe me, when it comes to family, just because your bloodline doesn't mean you're a good person.
Yep.
But when this whole social media thing, and that's one thing about the family and about, having from high school or from earlier phases of your life who have direct access with you.
Oh, yeah.
And they throw it in your face and they want something from you all the time. You get anything they think, just as much as I do, you're not making money off of social media posts,
No. And I think it's funny, since you bring up people who like to bring up your past. I've been told a couple of times, and I understand where the person's coming from, where they're like, Marcus, you don't need to air out all your dirty laundry. And I take the Eminem approach. If you ever saw the movie 8 Mile, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of 8 Mile, Eminem does his final rap, and he just rips himself apart. He does it so that the other guy has nothing to say about him. Well, when I tell you all my details, no one can ever come up and be like, well, that Marcus, when he used to drink, he was like, well, yeah, we already know that.
Yeah.
Do you know he was a shitty father and a really bad husband? Yep, we know that because he's let it all out. And then that way, that person doesn't have any power. Now, if they want to say anything, they've got to be a little more tricky, and they can nitpick all they want. But I mean, now you're grasping at straws, right? You're grabbing at the little breadcrumbs. Go ahead, you can have those. All the meat and potatoes, I already took care of that.
If only politicians would be open and honest like that.
Well,
now, because it's a skeleton in a closet. We all have, and that's one thing. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on this show and my other shows, and every time else we interact, is because you're open and honest about it, and you get me to be open and honest. Listen, I'm an open book. Believe me. Now, one thing I do want to take a step back of when Marcus got on that plane and he wanted to go and he wanted to learn Krav Maga overseas. He's nervous. He's younger. He's not quite yet the protagonist. He knows a little bit about fighting. He knows a lot about fighting, a lot more than normal people, but he hasn't become the true protagonist. When you were stepping on that flight, ticket in hand, what was going through your mind back then?
Well, the good part is I was in my 30s, so I'd lived a whole portion of my life. But what people don't understand is when I got on that plane, I had never traveled before. I'd never traveled out of Canada. My first international flight might have been Hawaii, but it's still America, North America. Anytime there's a Wendy's or a McDonald's right away, you're not really in a foreign country. So going to Israel was amazing in the fact that that was a leap of faith, and I came to terms with my own mortality, because all you have is fear and insecurity. I had the girl that I was dating at the time. She sewed Canadian flags on everything because there was some belief that maybe I wouldn't get shot because I was Canadian. But there was all the misinformation about, well, you're going to Israel, so you're going to probably get blown up and die. And when I got on the plane, I made a conscious decision that if this was my time, okay, cool. And every time I was in Israel at that time, the very beginning, I just was okay with my own mortality. The reason that's empowering is because no matter what comes my way, my biggest fear is gone. Now, I had a bunch of insecurities and just I would like to say there were breakthroughs, there were breakdowns. And in that 30 days, the growth that happened as a result of it, even if nothing had happened from there on out, the getting rid of old garbage and creating new garbage was was massive. The impact was massive, and all because of a leap of faith. I just did it because it didn't make any rhyme or reason. We were spending money on credit cards because we didn't have the money. I was going to a country that I didn't know anybody. The guy I was meeting, I just met a month earlier in a 15-minute conversation. Like, everything was just, I'm just going to do this, give it a shot. And it's turned out to be the single best leap of faith I could ever have done.
How did they break you down? I mean, instructors in North America, Canada, US are probably a lot different than when you're going to the origins.
Yeah.
And you're getting there and you think you know what's going on. You're in your 30s and you're like, I can handle it. I could take it. When you first step on it, that mat, and you're like, what is that feeling like?
Yeah. So my training was really accelerated. Now, my background, having done martial arts for literally at that point 30 years, I mean, my coordination, I didn't have to do the basics. We were going through the basics, and everything was fast, 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 fast. You got it, good, moving on. And they don't yell. They don't yell, like, even when they're in the military, like boot, or the higher elite ones, unless there's a selection situation, they don't yell at anything. Come on, you can do it. They do it very much of a mental breakdown. Like, really, you're not getting this already? What's going on? I mean, my grandmother can do this. Come on. They're very subtle about it. So, and that part I was not accustomed to. I was accustomed to love being in the form of violence, verbal or mental violence, physical, verbal, or mental violence. So to have somebody just be very calm, be like, Marcus, I really think that you should be doing better by now. It was crushing me. Man, I had a breakdown within the first 2 days. Now, looking back, I can say, well, it was jet lag and it was all these things. But at the end of the day, it was getting fed through a fire hose. The op tempo, I always like saying that because it makes me feel like I'm James Reese.
Yeah.
My op tempo was extremely high.
Exactly.
But my learning was go, go, go. We were going for hours and hours and hours with little to no breaks. So and I tell this story because it really impacted how I teach. We were doing defense against a knife stab, which is you block it, normal block, and then you counterattack, and then you run away or whatever. So I was sucking at it. I was sucking. Sucking. So he takes a 5-minute break, and he comes back, and he comes and stabs me, and I see the metal, and I know for a fact it's a kitchen knife because I remember the kitchen knives because we were trained at his house 2 feet away. I block, I scream a profanity, I whack him in the mouth, and I go to throw the kick. Thankfully, he knew the kick was coming, so he must have internalized his testicles because I didn't kick them. And I scream at the top of the lungs, "What the blank are you doing?" He looked at me, and I'm shaking, adrenaline dumps, everything. I'm just a mess. He goes, "See, you got it. Let's move on." And it was for him. It was that simple. He needed to sit there and let me know that I was good. Now, flash forward about 5 years. I'm in Hong Kong with him. We're doing testing. I've got to go to my next level. Again, a bunch of information. And then he just said stop. And then he had 6 people with sticks, knives, guns just coming at me, ambushing me. And, I did my job. And he said, Marcus, he said, when you have to think, you're shit. He said, I throw 5, 6, 7 people all ready to kill you, and you're fantastic. You're perfect. And there was a lot of big things about that. The more you think, the worse it is, and the more you just react and go with the faith. Your faith inside of you is always stronger than in here. Your brain will wreck you because of the fact that, and the more intelligent you are, the worse it is, because then all of a sudden you're gone and all these things. Inside of you, you're a good person. You can do it. Things like dealing with violence and stuff, you can be educated on that. Are you willing? And I'm going to say this to the parents, especially the females. Well, no, actually, I'll just put it to everybody because it applies. Let's say you're a 40-year-old person, man or woman, and you've got kids, and you're like, I don't even know what a protagonist is. I couldn't fight. I couldn't Jason Bourne somebody. I couldn't James Reese them. And then I'm going to ask you this. Just bear with me for a second. The parent is in front of the problem. The child is behind. And the problem is coming at them and making it very clear, I'm going to severely hurt your little one. Every parent, regardless of skill set, physical abilities, or mental awareness, will do everything within their nature to stop and hurt whatever the enemy is in front of you. So you already have it innate, like you were born with it. All the fancy stuff, we just need to open that door, say, okay, we're going to bring that person out. Here's some moves, put them back in. We all have it in us. Everybody's the protagonist in their story, especially when it comes to their children. Everybody, everyone. There's not one. And the ones that aren't are usually sociopaths, and we want them dead anyway, so who cares about them? But the average parent is a protagonist for their child. Now, here's where, just bear with me, because I know I'm like, ugh.
Keep talking, brother. I love it.
I would prefer, if I had an option, yes, I'm glad that you can be a protagonist for your child. It's more important that you're a protagonist for yourself, because if you're a protagonist for yourself, then just as a byproduct, you're a protagonist for the child. Please don't let an extreme situation, mama bear, papa bear, need to come out. Do it for yourself, because a lot of those ambushes, mental, physical, emotional, all those ambushes of that insurgency ends up being deflected, and you have a coping mechanism that will not get fed in by negative fears and insecurities. And it's easy. Just listen to your heart. You got it.
Your key phrase, be a nightmare for bad guys, sums that up absolutely. And that's why I like seeing you're traveling all over the country, you're training, you're consulting, and you're doing it for people, everyday people. So let's jump into that. I want to know how do people find you? How do they get involved? And tell me about some of the stuff you're doing out there, because I'm always amazed you're on the road all the time.
Well, my website is marcustorgerson.com. I'm on all socials with the exception of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And I'm doing not as much traveling as I have in the past, which is where COVID was actually a blessing for me, because I was able to have some clarity, retire from being on the team in Israel, going around the world. I was able to retire with my head up saying, guys, I just need to go a different direction, not knowing what that direction was. So the work I do now, I do a lot of work with regular men and women where initially it's about the self-defense, but it's never about the self-defense. Me teaching somebody how to palm heel strike and kick somebody in the groin and headbutt and bite faces and spit, like those are that's cool. It's the takeaway is, I told you could do it. You didn't believe me. Now with a little bit of stress and a little bit of, stirring the pot a little bit, now see you have what's in you that was already there. All I did literally was open the door and say, can they come out to play? And then all the stuff that's inside comes out. So when I do stuff like that I'm very transparent. I'll teach you whatever you want. You want to do gun defenses? You want to shoot? You want to stab? You want to take an axe? Right on, all for it. Just understand that my agenda is going to be the byproduct. That's all I care about. Empowering is a word that's just been brutalized for forever, where I would rather just say educate. I'm just educating you. And then whatever you get out of it is what you get out of it. Now, in a couple of months, I'll be September, I'm going to be going to Minnesota to work with some special needs people, which is, doing adaptive Krav Maga or adaptive self-defense. And I want to make sure we're clear about this, because I've had people come up like, well, how are you going to teach somebody who's a paraplegic to do this? And that's when I wish they were in front of me so I could headbutt them, because, the ignorance is deep in you. I felt like a little bit of Yoda coming out on that one. When I have somebody with cerebral palsy or any challenge, doesn't matter, you can put anything. And I'm going to use the cerebral palsy because there's a girl that resonates in my head. And we're doing slaps, or same thing as a knife, 90 degrees. And there's a girl who has very little control of her body. And I'm going really slow, and I'm going to slap her face. And she blocks, and then she goes and gives me a high five to the face. the smile from the block after the first initial, like, oh my goodness, and then the smile lighting up about, I'm doing it. I'm like the normal kids, because I don't treat anybody differently. I don't care what your challenges are. I don't care what you can't do. I care what you can do. Seeing that, look, listen, she knows that if somebody, a bad person, was going to be violent, her ass is kicked just like yours, mine, or anybody else's. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is you take somebody with a challenge and they're part of the cool kids, part of the normal kids, whatever the frick normal is, and all of a sudden they're lit up. Who's to say that they didn't just improve the quality of life, which improving their quality of life, perhaps they have a desire to not expire as soon as maybe they were going to. So when I do the self-defense stuff, like, I hate being in a box. I spent 16 years putting myself in a box that I'm now trying to jump out of and push away. The irony is not falling on me at all. Anybody can learn to be violent. Anybody. Some people are just having it as a natural gift. Some people, they've got scar tissue all around them, so it's challenging to do it. You got to break through that. But the being violent is not the answer. It's knowing that you can be and choosing not to be. Walking away. Being like, you know what, sir? You're absolutely right. I actually do ingest male organs in my mouth on a regular basis. I'm happy that you knew that. Thank you very much. Please don't put it on the internet because, there's some photos. I'll make a joke about it or whatever. I hate your shirt. You know what? I hate it too. My first wife gave it to me as a joke. She didn't think I'd keep it. I don't blame you. I'm going to go buy another one right now. You know what? Whatever. Being able to de-escalate. De-escalation comes from confidence in what you're doing. That's it. That's all de-escalation is. A mother who sees that she's surrounded by 6 people isn't going to go toe-to-toe unless pushed against the wall. However, she's going to use whatever talent she has to say, listen, I'm with my son. Please let us go. She'll do whatever she takes until you cross the line. And then that's it. She's going to kill everything.
Everything.
Right? What I would love to see more people be is saying, I'm not a coward for taking a step back and off to the side and reassessing where my attacks come from. I'm not a coward for, doing the push and the you're dead, you're whatever, doing all that stuff we did in elementary school that we're still doing in our 50s. But having the confidence and saying, I'm going to take a step back. Listen, I don't need to get into this. I don't need the court case. I don't need the lawyer's costs. I don't need the breaking of my hand, whatever. All the things that happen with a fight or an altercation. And that confidence can only come through 2 ways: education and severe or serious stress on the body on a regular basis that allows the body to say, I'm physically, mentally, and emotionally capable of doing what I need to do to get the job done. Now, you've taken your fitness to a whole different level, right? I mean, let's be honest, you have. If most of our population, I'm pointing over here first, if we took better care of our bodies, we would have more security and confidence in the things that we do. Our quality of life would improve. And most of the things that our negative insurgency feeds on, those little gremlins feed on, would dissipate. They'd have nothing to feed on. Nothing. Take away the things they can feed on so that when the real things happen, the serious things, inside our confidence will come out and be like, look, man, you can run that half mile and save that kid in that water. You can do it. There won't be a pause. There will not be a pause. You'll be like, kid's drowning, I'm going in. Or car, I'm using extremes because that's the only way we live. There's a car flipped over and I need to get that door open. Well, you know what? I can do it. I don't need to do it in a way that will blow my spine out. I'm going to actually be able to do it. I have the confidence in my physical ability because I've stressed my body out in growth, in healthy, progressive fitness, so that I can be ready for when it happens. That goes for martial arts, defensive tactics, whatever you want. It goes up because we're human beings. We learn the same way every single time. We need stress, we need happiness, we need a hug, and we need more stress to accomplish something. Anyways,
Perfect, brother.
I'm off my TED talk now.
No, that's perfect. And that's what becoming a protagonist is.
Yes.
It means you're taking a step back, you're evaluating. And the other thing is being prepared. Being prepared exactly what this quote says: being prepared to walk with peace in your heart, love in your soul, and violence in your head.
Yep. Yep.
Brother, I do appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on. And I love talking about this stuff, man. And you're always welcome on the show, whatever show I'm doing.
You just say so, and I'll be there.
Well, everybody, you could find Marcus Torgerson on all the social medias, the important ones, and don't be negative. And please, what kind of final words you got for the audience, brother?
Stop living in your past. Whatever you couldn't do before for whatever reason, or they told you to, why don't you just give it a shot? Just try it. You don't have to make a big deal about it. You don't have to put it on social media. Just try it. Whatever it is. I'll bet you good money. I'll bet you money that we don't even have. I'll even throw you in the bunch here. We'll take all our money. I'll bet you will be able to do it if you just let go of that old version of you.
Love it. That old version is out, brother.
Yep.